All right, welcome to the Explainer. We're not wasting any time today because this is a big one. Massive military strikes have just been launched against Iran. Things are moving incredibly fast, so let's break down what we actually know right now.
So what are we talking about? Literally just hours ago, a huge joint military operation between the US and Israel kicked off against Iran. We're getting reports of explosions in several cities, but it really looks like the main event is happening in the capital, Tehran.
And look, let's be super clear here. This is not some small-time skirmish. The first reports coming in suggest the main targets were the office and even the home of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. You know, when you target the head of state, that sends a message that's impossible to ignore.
Okay, so let's dig into this name because it's a huge deal. Operation Roaring Lion. Why that name? The lion was the symbol of the old Iranian monarchy, the Shah's regime, which, as you might remember, was backed by the US. So by picking that name, the US and Israel are sending a pretty blatant signal. This might not just be about hitting a few military sites, this could be about a full-on push for regime change.
So you're probably asking, how on earth did we get here? Well, the official story for why this attack happened didn't just pop up overnight. It's really the boiling point after a month of tensions just getting worse and worse. Okay, let's walk through the timeline because it's pretty wild. It all started about 5 or 6 weeks ago. The US starts this massive military buildup in the region. Then, boom, huge anti-regime protests break out all over Iran. The crackdown was brutal. The US started issuing these very public warnings to Iran, and then the final piece of the puzzle, just 2 days ago, those super high-stakes nuclear talks in Geneva completely collapse. It really seems like that was the final straw.
And here's a little kind of funny, kind of bizarre detail about that whole military buildup. The USS Gerald Ford, the biggest, baddest aircraft carrier in the world, was actually held up on its way to the Mediterranean because of a major plumbing problem. Seriously, it just goes to show, even in modern warfare, sometimes the basics can throw a wrench in the works.
So that's the official line, right? They're saying this is about supporting the protesters and a direct response to the failed nuclear talks. But is that the whole story? The sources we're looking at suggest there might be something much deeper going on here. All right, this is where we need to look past that official timeline. Because what the analysis suggests is that while all those recent events were the spark, the firewood for this fire has been piling up for years. And it all seems to circle back to one big thing.
And that one big thing has always been Iran's nuclear program. For years, we've heard US and Israeli officials call it an existential threat. But to really get what's happening now, we have to rewind a bit, back to that huge deal that was supposed to fix all of this without a single shot being fired.
Remember the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, back in 2014? The agreement was actually pretty straightforward. Iran promised to stop all its nuclear enrichment and hand over its existing stockpile. In exchange, all those crushing economic sanctions would be lifted. At the time, everyone was hailing it as this incredible diplomatic win that literally stopped a war in its tracks.
And here's the most important part. It was working. It really was. For 4 straight years, the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, kept verifying over and over again that Iran was doing exactly what it promised. All the other countries in the deal, including close US allies in Europe, were all on the same page. The deal was holding. And then came 2018. The US, all on its own, just quit the deal, pulled out, and then slammed all those sanctions right back on Iran. What happened next? Well, pretty predictably, Iran responded by firing up its nuclear enrichment program again. And just like that, we were right back on the path to the exact conflict the deal was meant to avoid.
So this is where you get 2 totally competing stories about what's happening today. You've got the official reason, this is a necessary strike to stop Iran from getting a nuke and to help the protesters. But then there's this other view, the one we're exploring from the source material, which says this has been the goal all along, regime change. And the protests and failed talks were just the perfect excuse to finally pull the trigger. Which brings us right back to that name, Operation Roaring Lion. This analysis from the source is incredibly direct about it. The argument is that this isn't about bringing democracy to Iran. Not at all. It's about bringing back the monarchy, a government that would be much friendlier to US and Israeli strategic goals.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What happens now? Because Iran, even after a hit like this, is definitely not going to just sit back and take it. The chance of this whole thing spiraling completely out of control is, right now, terrifyingly high. So what's in Iran's playbook?
Well, they have some pretty serious cards to play. They could unleash their ballistic missiles on Israel and on all those US bases dotted around the region. They could activate their proxies. We're talking Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. They could even try to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which would choke off something like 20% of the entire world's oil supply. And that's not even counting their covert networks, which could cause chaos with sabotage ops.
And this is the real danger. Any one of those responses could immediately suck in the neighbors, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, you name it. And that right there is the nightmare scenario. What starts as a limited strike explodes into an all-out regional war that nobody can control.
Because here's the thing, a huge war in the Middle East never just stays in the Middle East. The ripple effects are global. To really get a sense of the stakes, let's just take a look at what this means for a country like India. First off, money, the economy. India's entire economic engine is incredibly thirsty for oil from this region. We're talking about 65% of its oil imports coming right from the Middle East. So you mess with those shipping lanes like the Strait of Hormuz, and you're not just creating a problem, you're delivering a massive shock to one of the world's biggest economies.
But it's not just about oil. There's a massive human cost here. Did you know there are over 10 million Indian citizens living and working in the Gulf? 10 million. A regional war puts every single one of them in danger. Imagine the nightmare of trying to evacuate that many people. The scale is just mind-boggling.
And finally, think about the long game. Years, even decades of strategic projects are now on the line. Things like the Chabahar port, which is India's big ticket to Central Asia, are suddenly at risk. And that huge economic corridor project, the one connecting India to Europe through the Middle East that everyone was so excited about, in this environment, it's basically a fantasy.
So that's where we stand. And it all boils down to one huge critical question. Was this a surgical strike to take out a threat, like we're being told? Or did we all just watch someone light a match and toss it onto a regional powder keg, starting a fire that could burn completely out of control? I guess we're about to find out.